On a random winter day, Kent County Police received a phone call from 17-year-old John Siesling reporting a home invasion and robbery that turned deadly. He gave the address to his home on Walker Avenue, and when police arrived, they saw John at the front door, freshly showered with his hair still wet. Upon walking into the home, they found his 42-year-old mother Sharon deceased in the kitchen, his 15-year-old sister Caitlin deceased near an outside door, and his 6-year-old sister Leah deceased in her bedroom. Autopsy reports would later determine each of their bodies suffered multiple stab wounds, and Caitlin had been sexually assaulted with a baseball bat. Immediately, John was taken to the police station for an interview. He was interviewed by Walker Police Detective Dan Rapp, who described John's demeanor as flat and emotionless. In his police interview, he still blamed robbers, but soon enough, he began taking responsibility through an alter ego, Johnny. He said he only said robbers because he feared that police would rough him up if they knew he was responsible. He then gave a very detailed and brutal account of what took place that day. He said he got into an argument with his sister Caitlin, which led to a fight with his mother. He then struck his mother in the head with a bat, and as she was crawling away up the stairs, he caught up to her and slit her throat. After she was deceased, he went after his sister Caitlin in the same manner. His other sister Leah had been playing with snow in the front yard during the murders. But after walking inside and finding the home covered in blood, she began to cry. Her cries captured the attention of John, and when she wouldn't stop crying, he jammed the knife into her throat and put her to bed, still in her snow pants and boots. Following the killings, John contemplated how he could get out of his doings before realizing the significance of what he had done. He considered leaving in his mother's car, but realized he would be caught anyway. Instead, he washed his clothes, took a shower, and tried to clean the scene. He then called 911 to report a home invasion and robbery. His father, Jan Siesling, was not present in the house during the time of the killings. He was working as a truck driver that day, and his sister remembers receiving the call from him. He kept saying, "The whole family is gone. They're dead." His motive for the killings remained a mystery. John was the oldest of 3 children of Jan and Sharon Siesling. His father was a long-distance truck driver who wasn't home much, and his mother was a receptionist at a hospital. John had no prior record of juvenile crime and was described as a melancholy, sullen kind of kid with few happy childhood memories. His family fought often, even during camping trips every July to Ludington State Park, John said. Lying alone in the woods at the state park, he spent hours watching trees bend in the wind. There were no metaphorical chains to hold me down, nobody yelling at me, he said. According to a psychologist who testified in his trial, he complained that his father was an alcoholic. He also claimed his father often struck him with his hands and with a belt. His father denies all of these claims. John also said he loved his father but did not like him, and also despised his mother, who he said also abused him. By the age of 12, John was smoking marijuana and then turned into other drugs like LSD, cocaine, heroin, and PCP. He would indulge with friends who partied during the afternoons at his home when his parents worked. He dropped out of Kanawha High School by his junior year, then transferred to a different high school, to then drop out again just weeks later. Some sources also mention that John was a Wiccan, a follower of a neo-pagan religion. He said in the weeks before the killings, he ran away from home several times. He even told his friends his plans to kill his family, but they later testified that they thought he was joking. John was eventually arrested and charged with the 3 killings of his family members. During his trial, he told a slightly different account. He said that he argued with his sister Caitlin, which then led to the fight with his mother, but then he locked himself in his room and laid in bed for several hours. The next thing he knew, he said, he was covered in blood walking through the house, and upon seeing his mother's and sister's bodies, he vomited in the kitchen sink. Afterwards, he noticed that his mother was still alive as he heard her breathing. "I thought I heard her say something. Why? I love you. Please don't kill your father." He said he doesn't know if he imagined it or even if it was physically possible for her to speak. He ran to call 911 for help, he said, but then she stopped breathing. There was no sound. He checked her pulse, and there was none. But a police detective said John's blackout story doesn't quite fit the facts. He said John gave police a very detailed description of the crime, including how he led Leah, his 6-year-old sister who was crying, to her bedroom before killing her. On the witness stand, John finally admitted to murdering his family. He said he was in kind of a lucid dreaming state during it all, saying, "I was aware of my actions, but I didn't feel I was in control of my actions. After I committed the crimes, I was horrified. I didn't know what to do. I was frantic. I was running around the house doing various things." He said he only brought up his alter ego Johnny as a way to describe his actions because he didn't feel he was committing the crimes. He felt someone else was doing it. He testified that in the months before the killings, he was hospitalized twice for severe depression, suicide attempts, and anger issues. In court, John pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity, but the courts were not buying it. At 17, he received a mandatory punishment of life in prison without parole for 3 counts of first-degree murder. The U.S. Supreme Court has since ruled that the mandatory sentence is cruel and unusual punishment for a juvenile and allowed for resentencing. Since John was 17 at the time, it made him eligible to receive a lighter sentence. During a hearing on September 8, 2021, John said he wouldn't pose a risk if he was released from prison, now nearly 20 years later. He asked the judge if his sentence of life without parole can be reduced to set terms so that he would one day be eligible for parole. He said he deserved prison, but hopes to leave one day. He said, "If I have a term of years, I would not commit any crime, violent or otherwise, for the rest of my life." However, his aunt, the sister of his father, reminded the court of the damages he caused. She said, "I think he belongs in jail right where he is right now. He not only hurt his mom, his sisters, he hurt the whole family. His dad was never the same." A few days after the killing, she actually visited John in prison and described him as stone cold with no remorse. And that was her last visit.
If he truly was somebody who was prone to violence, if he truly was somebody who had an inability to control his behavior, any sort of aggression or anger, we would have seen a lot of that in his prison record. We didn't.
In 24 years of doing my job, I have never seen a more scary individual, and an individual who should be feared.
On September 30th, he was denied a chance to be resentenced. The home of where the Siesling family lived and where the murders took place actually belonged to longtime owner Amanda G., whose family rented it out to John's mother Sharon in 2003. Everyone in the area knows what happened there. Just the mention of the address raises eyebrows. Drivers slow down, staring and pointing, with people sometimes yelling as they pass, she said. When the killings occurred, Amanda was forced to clean the crime scene afterwards. Left behind by investigators after working the crime scene, there's still blood in corners and crevices that Amanda can't get out to this day. She still currently resides at that home, but for 2021's Halloween, Amanda came under fire for decorating the house's front yard with mock gravestones and fake blood that were inspired by the 2003 killings. Shocked and angered, her neighbors quickly called her decor disrespectful. Amanda decorated the front yard of her home with 3 gravestones and caution tape. A baseball bat and crime scene evidence markers were scattered on the lawn. The front door, meanwhile, featured "Help Us" scrawled in fake blood with the silhouettes of people clamoring to exit the home in full view of the entire neighborhood. For Kathy Gordon, a former classmate of 15-year-old Caitlin, she remembers every last detail of those terrible events and didn't appreciate Amanda's decorations one bit. Kathy recalls that the bus drivers tried to divert their morning routes to school to avoid driving by the crime scene on that terrible day, but had no choice but to take Walker Avenue. She said seeing caution tape encircling her murdered friend's house made her want to vomit, and that Amanda's macabre display was truly unacceptable. Amanda, however, says for her, the display was cathartic. "We know some people might look at it and say, oh my God," she said. But this is my way of saying, we are well aware. Stop screaming at us when you're driving past my house. That family that lived there, that family was our friends. I'm not going to sweep it under the rug and act like it didn't happen. Maybe this is my way of dealing with it." Amanda said that she never meant to offend anyone with the display, which has since been taken down. She also said her family annually commemorates the tragedy on its January 23rd anniversary, and that Sharon was a great friend to my mother and also a great friend of my grandma. Retired Walker Police Detective Dan Rapp, who also interviewed John that day, said he is still haunted by the crime scene. He is so troubled that he still periodically checks the State Department of Corrections website to make sure John, despite being ineligible for parole, is still locked up. John will now remain locked up for the rest of his life. Now 36, John has excelled at programs and college courses and has a job in food service management while in prison. He said he wakes up every day in prison and knows why he's there, and that he's sorry for what he did. In his words, "The killings are a wet blanket every day on my shoulders that I can never get off." And as he never should, may Sharon, Caitlin, and Leah rest in paradise, and may his father Jan heal and find ease. Stay safe this Halloween, and thank you all for watching.